Tonight, I'm going to share the most horrifying, unbelievable day of my life. A day that started with pure joy and ended with a truth so shocking it still makes my blood run cold. My name is Chloe, and I was supposed to get married June 15th, 2025, a perfect summer day. The venue was beautiful, an old rustic barn decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers. All our friends and family were there, hundreds of them, smiling, laughing, ready to celebrate. My fiancé, Liam, was everything I ever wanted. Kind, funny, incredibly handsome. We'd been together since college, built our lives side by side, dreaming of this moment. Our entire relationship felt like a fairy tale, solid and unwavering. We planned every detail of the wedding together, from the tiny succulents on the tables to the song for our first dance. I was so in love, so sure of our future. When I woke up that morning, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky, either literally or figuratively. My bridesmaids were buzzing around, helping me into my dress. My mom was crying happy tears. The air was thick with excitement and anticipation. I felt beautiful, radiant, completely overwhelmed with happiness. This was it, the culmination of a decade of dreams. When it was time for the ceremony, my dad walked me down the aisle. The music swelled, my heart pounded with joy, and I saw Liam standing at the altar, looking at me with that smile, the one that always made my knees weak. He looked so happy, so ready. My dad squeezed my hand, kissed my cheek, and then I was there, standing opposite Liam, ready to say, "I do." The officiant began to speak, his voice calm and clear, setting the scene for our vows. I looked into Liam's eyes, filled with love and a lifetime of promises. But then something shifted, a tiny flicker in his eyes, a tension in his jaw I hadn't noticed before. He looked distant, frightened. My heart started to race, a cold knot forming in my stomach. What was happening? The officiant paused, sensing the shift. Everyone in the church was silent, waiting. Liam took a deep breath, and his gaze left mine, sweeping across the faces in the pews as if searching for something or someone. And then he turned. Without a word, without a glance back, he walked away. He just left, right there, at the altar. My perfect day shattered into a million pieces. The music stopped. A collective gasp rippled through the church. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my veil suddenly feeling heavy, suffocating. My dad rushed to my side, his face a mask of shock and confusion. Whispers erupted, turning into murmurs, then a confused roar. People started standing up, craning their necks, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stared at the empty space where Liam had been, my mind refusing to comprehend. The officiant looked utterly bewildered, trying to regain control. My bridesmaids rushed forward, their faces filled with horror and pity. My mom was sobbing, burying her face in my dad's shoulder. It felt like an out-of-body experience, watching my own life crumble in slow motion. Why? Why would he do this? After all these years, after all our plans, after all the love we shared? The questions screamed in my head, but there were no answers, just a gaping, painful void. Friends tried to comfort me, whispering apologies and theories. Maybe he got cold feet. Maybe he had a panic attack. But none of it made sense. Liam wasn't like that. He was steady. He was committed. This was completely out of character. The wedding quickly dissolved into chaos. Guests, unsure of what to do, started leaving. The beautiful decorations, the carefully chosen flowers, all seemed to mock me now, silent witnesses to my humiliation. I was led away from the altar, my expensive dress dragging on the floor, feeling like a caricature of a heartbroken bride. We went to a small room at the back of the venue, away from the prying eyes. My parents were furious, devastated. They called Liam's phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. His family, who were equally shocked, had no answers either. His best man, Mark, was pale, shaking his head in disbelief, saying Liam had seemed fine just moments before. He kept repeating, "I don't understand." He seemed so happy. 2 hours, 2 agonizing hours passed. 2 hours of unanswered calls, wild theories, and a mounting despair. 2 hours of sitting there in my wedding dress feeling utterly, incomprehensibly abandoned. And then my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. My dad looked at me, a grim expression on his face, and handed me the phone. I answered, my voice trembling. What I heard next would change my life forever. The voice on the other end of the line was frantic, breathless. It was a woman, crying, almost incoherent. "Is this Chloe?" she wailed. "Is this Liam's fiancé?" My heart pounded. "Yes," I managed to choke out. "Who is this? Where's Liam?" Her next words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. "He's here," she sobbed. "He's at St. Jude's Hospital. He collapsed and he had a seizure." St. Jude's? A seizure? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. What happened? Who are you?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I'm Dr. Chen," she managed between sobs. "I'm his doctor. He has a serious brain tumor. He's been hiding it for months. It's aggressive. He had a seizure right after he left the church." The world spun. A brain tumor? He was dying? This was the reason he left me at the altar? Not cold feet, not another woman, but a terminal illness? My initial shock slowly began to morph into a confusing mix of disbelief and a strange, profound relief. Relief that he hadn't abandoned me out of malice, but out of a desperate, misguided attempt to protect me. But then, Dr. Chen's voice broke through my daze again, her tone shifting, becoming more urgent, almost accusatory. "There's something else, Chloe. Something he made me promise to tell you if this happened. He left you a letter. He said you have to read it, but there's a reason he hid this from you. He told me everything. You need to know the whole truth, not just about his illness." My stomach dropped. The relief evaporated, replaced by a fresh wave of dread. Not just his illness? What else could there possibly be? Dr. Chen gave me a room number and hung up. My parents looked at me, their faces full of questions. "Liam's at St. Jude's," I told them, my voice hollow. "He has a brain tumor. He collapsed after he left." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a silence filled with a different kind of horror. We rushed to the hospital, my wedding dress still on, feeling like a macabre costume. We arrived at St. Jude's Hospital, a frantic blur of white corridors and the sterile smell of disinfectant. Liam was in a private room, hooked up to machines, his face pale and drawn. He looked so frail, so unlike the strong, vibrant man I was supposed to marry just hours ago. My heart ached, a new kind of pain mixing with the raw wound of betrayal. My parents stayed in the waiting room, giving me space. I walked to his bedside, tears silently streaming down my face. He opened his eyes, saw me, and a look of profound sorrow crossed his features. His lips moved, trying to speak, but no sound came out. A nurse quickly came over. "He's just had a very severe seizure," she explained softly. "He's weak. He left a letter for you. It's on the nightstand." My hand trembled as I reached for the envelope. It was thick, heavier than I expected. My name was written on it in Liam's familiar handwriting. I tore it open, pulling out several pages. The first page was a desperate apology, reiterating his love for me and explaining his illness. He wrote that he couldn't bear to put me through his decline, to become a burden. He thought leaving me at the altar was the cruelest, quickest way to make me hate him, to force me to move on before he became a shell of himself. My eyes blurred with tears as I read his agonizing words. It almost made sense. A terrible, misguided act of love. But then I turned the page. The next part wasn't about his illness. It was a confession about something else entirely, something much, much older. He wrote about a secret he'd carried since before we met, a dark secret from his past, a decision made in desperation. He said he had tried to bury it, to live a normal life with me, but his illness had forced him to face all his hidden demons. He confessed that when he was 18, just before he went to college, he was involved in a terrible accident, a hit and run. He had been drinking, and he killed someone. He panicked. His parents, wealthy and influential, covered it up. They made it disappear. He never faced justice. He lived with that guilt every single day, he wrote. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he revealed about the victim. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the letter steady. Liam, a hit and run, a secret covered up by his parents, the man I loved, a killer? My mind reeled, trying to reconcile the loving, gentle Liam I knew with the dark confession on the page. But the letter wasn't finished. There was more. He wrote that the victim was a young woman, a college student walking home late from a study group. He remembered flashes, the sudden impact, the scream, the terrible silence that followed. His parents had arranged everything, making sure no one ever traced it back to him. He lived with the constant fear of exposure, the crushing weight of his unpunished crime. This was the secret doctor. Chen had mentioned the deeper truth he couldn't take to his grave. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of disorientation. The humiliation at the altar, the shock of his illness, it all faded in comparison to this monstrous revelation. This was the real reason he left, not just to spare me the pain of his illness, but to spare me the truth of who he truly was, a criminal who had escaped justice. And then I turned to the last page. My eyes scanned the words, expecting more details about his guilt, more apologies. But what I read next didn't just break my heart, it shattered my entire world into incomprehensible fragments. He wrote about the young woman he killed, detailing her name, her university, even her major. He said he saw her picture in the local paper, a small article buried deep within the pages, days after the accident. He said he wrote her name, and as I read it, a cold, sickening dread washed over me, a feeling so profound it stole the air from my lungs. The name he wrote was a name I knew, a name I cherished, the name of someone I had lost. My eyes fixed on the name on the page, unblinking, uncomprehending. The words blurred, then sharpened, stabbing into my brain like shards of glass. The victim of Liam's hit and run, the young woman he killed, and whose death his parents covered up, was my older sister, Sarah, my vibrant, brilliant big sister who was killed in a hit and run near her college campus 10 years ago. The police never found the driver. The case went cold. My parents were destroyed. My family never recovered. And now, the man I was supposed to marry, the man I loved with every fiber of my being, was the monster who took her from us. The grief, the anger, the raw, unbearable pain I thought I'd processed years ago came rushing back, multiplied 1,000-fold. It wasn't just a random tragedy, it was him. All this time, the man I shared my life with, the man I was planning a future with, was the reason for my family's deepest sorrow. He had sat across from me at countless family dinners, listened to my parents talk about their missing daughter, watched me cry over her memory, and he had never said a word. He had lived with this secret, knowing the truth of his monstrous act while pretending to be the loving fiancé of the victim's sister. It was beyond betrayal. It was a macabre, sickening joke. I wanted to scream, I wanted to rage, but no sound came out. My body felt numb, paralyzed by the sheer horror of the revelation. The room, the hospital, Liam hooked up to machines. It all faded into a blurry backdrop. All I could see was Sarah's face, vibrant and smiling, and then Liam's face, contorted in silent confession. The universe was playing a cruel, twisted game. He hadn't just left me at the altar. He had spared me the ultimate, most unspeakable horror of marrying my sister's killer. He couldn't take that secret with him, not to his grave. But the confession itself was another act of unimaginable cruelty. I don't know how long I stood there, clutching the letter, staring at Liam's still form. My mind was a whirlwind of rage, disbelief, and a cold, chilling clarity. The man I loved was a murderer. The man who abandoned me at the altar had, in a twisted way, given me the most horrific wedding gift, the truth about my sister's death. I carefully folded the letter, placing it back in the envelope. When the nurse returned, she asked if I needed anything. I just shook my head. I walked out of Liam's room, past my waiting parents, and left the hospital without a word. I went home, still in my wedding dress, a symbol of a dream that had turned into a nightmare. I showed the letter to my parents. They read it in stunned silence, their faces draining of color as they recognized Sarah's name, the date, the details of that fateful night. The grief of losing Sarah resurfaced, raw and intense, now coupled with an unimaginable rage at the man who had pretended to love me while harboring such a monstrous secret. They called the police immediately. The letter, Liam's confession, was all the proof they needed. Liam was arrested that night, right there in his hospital bed. The media frenzy was immediate and brutal. The story of the runaway groom, the dying fiancé, quickly morphed into the horrific truth of a decade-old cold case solved by a deathbed confession. My family's private tragedy became national news. I became a symbol of betrayal and unimaginable loss. The wedding venue, the guests, the dress, all secondary to the horror that had been hidden in plain sight. Liam passed away in custody a few weeks later, his brain tumor claiming him before he could face trial. There was no justice in a courtroom, but his confession gave us the closure we desperately needed, albeit in the most agonizing way imaginable. My parents finally knew who took their daughter. I finally knew the truth about the man I almost married. My life will never be the same. The fairy tale shattered, replaced by a dark, chilling reality. But in the ruins there's a strange peace. The truth, however ugly, is finally out. This isn't just my confession, it's a plea. If this story touched you, disturbed you, or stayed with you, don't leave in silence. Subscribe, comment, share. We release new confessions every week because someone out there is still hiding the truth.